Hi there, students. Thank you for being part of this presentation. My name is Luis Silva, and today we're going to be focusing on American government, foundations of U.S. democracy, and the development, in particular, of the United States democratic system. What will we learn today? Well, we only have one main thing that we're focusing on today, and that is what was the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was and is a very important document that was written in 1215, and it's a historical document that took some powers away from the king and gave some rights and freedoms to the people. The Magna Carta means the Great Charter in Latin. By the way, we are talking about England in this case. Now, on June 15th, 1215, the barons of medieval England confronted King John and basically forced him to put a seal on the Magna Carta. King John had been a very unpopular king who abused his power, oppressed his subjects, and angered the barons by increasing taxes and demanding soldiers for his military campaigns abroad. Now, the barons obviously did not like this king because he was doing whatever he wanted. He had no limits on his power, and obviously he was taking advantage of that. So the barons basically said, no, we need to put a stop to this king, and they rose in rebellion and wrote the Articles of the Barons, which are now known as the Magna Carta, and it contains 63 clauses promising: 1, all free men access to courts and a fair trial, eliminating unfair fines and punishment. The Magna Carta is often thought as the cornerstone of liberty and the chief defense against arbitrary and unjust rule in England. But not only in England, because the Magna Carta became also a symbol of freedom for Americans. The Magna Carta became a symbol of having rights for many Americans, and as we're going to be looking in the next slides, how this document, very old document, played a significant role in shaping the United States Constitution. For the first time in history, a ruler placed himself under the rule of law, in this case King John. The Magna Carta was one of the forerunners of the U.S. Constitution and its first 10 Amendment. Like I mentioned to you before, the Founding Fathers were not ignorant. They actually liked to study, and they, implemented some of those ideals that are represented and written in the Magna Carta. It became, in this case, the Magna Carta, a symbol of supremacy of the Constitution over the king, which is exactly what we have now. The Founding Fathers of the United States, they actually thought that the Constitution was the supreme law of the land, and that's why they took so long and carefully wrote this document. The same thing with the Magna Carta. It was a document that basically told the king, you know what? This document is an agreement between the people and you, the king. And in this agreement, we are limiting you to many things, basically. Now, the foundation of democracy in England was laid by the Magna Carta, which basically put restrictions on the absolute powers of the king. Again, like I said before, the king was no longer absolute. The king no longer could rule as he wanted, but instead now he was restricted by this document known as the Magna Carta. Now, we're going to be looking in particular at some of the clauses that have impacted the government of the United States. And in clause number 12, the king is restricted in the types of taxes he can impose without approval of the council, a group made up of the nobles. This restricted his ability to raise taxes for wars. This had been the main concern of the nobles in the years preceding the document, because taxes had been raised to fund a war against France. So the nobles were very angry, the nobles were very upset, and they did not want to continue to give money to the king. Especially when you have a king that rules without any limits, a king that does whatever he wants, well, guess what? At one point, in this case, the nobles of England decided to put together this document, the Magna Carta, to limit the powers of the king. Now, the nobility obviously benefited because the Magna Carta defined individual rights and emphasized the role of law in society. Now, this is very important too because the U.S. Constitution also defines individual rights and emphasizes the role of law in society. So this is a concept that was taken and adopted into the United States Constitution. Clause 39 of the Magna Carta: people should be punished only after a ruling by their peers. This is a way to say, guess what? You, the king, cannot come and say you're guilty and then we'll punish you for that. But instead, people should be able to determine if you're guilty. In our court system now, you have, if you're the accused, you have obviously the opportunity to defend yourself. You have the opportunity to prove that you're innocent, and you tend to prove this in front of your peers, in front of a group of people, the jury. And Clause 39 emphasizes that idea that the government should not and will not come and take your freedoms away just because they say you're guilty of something, unless you're proven guilty. Also, the phrase "no free man" implies that all people should be treated equally under the law. By the way, at least in theory, this sounds good, because you know that for the most part, if you do not have the resources, most of the times or many times you will be found guilty because you may not have the money to actually pay for your legal defense, your legal bills, which in our current court system or judicial system, that could run into thousands and thousands of dollars. So at least in theory, all people should be treated equally under the law, and this concept is also inserted into the United States Constitution. The Magna Carta restricted the king's ability to punish his subjects. Again, you cannot be punished without first having been or having gone through the process of the court system and prove your innocence or not prove your innocence. Now, clause number 1 of the Magna Carta, it's very important because it talks about the church. In this case, the church was exempted from the Magna Carta. The nobles made clear that the church should be free from interference of the king and nobility. An interesting point was that the nobles explicitly included the phrase "for us and our heirs forever," which basically means that they envision no point when government should be involved in the affairs of the church. This can be seen as a precursor to the philosophy regarding the separation of church and state that emerged in the Enlightenment thinking period. If you can see also from the quote here by Thomas Jefferson that he believed that there should be also separation between church and state. And he said that this is essential in a free society. Again, we go back to the principles of the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta played such a tremendous role in influencing the founding fathers. Moving on to the Magna Carta, clause number 12, the king was able to retain the right to tax the people on issues relating to the monarch's ransom and other issues. But he was actually limited in many other ways. But by retaining some powers to tax, the document implied that the monarchy was still an important aspect of the government. So the king could tax, issue taxes, or collect taxes, not for everything he wanted, but he actually had specific things on which he actually could collect taxes. Now, clause 39 of the Magna Carta was influential when it came to the United States Revolution because it outlined the individual rights of citizens. The early colonists considered themselves to be English. Remember, a lot of the colonists that arrived to America, they actually were English. So they believed that they were also accorded with these rights, which we now call due process. In the list of grievances section of the Declaration of Independence, the colonists mentioned instances where the judicial rights outlined in Clause 39 were ignored. So, as you can see, the Founding Fathers were very smart. They actually used, the Magna Carta itself, the clauses of the Magna Carta, in order to prove their points when they were trying to break away from the mother country, Great Britain. And in the Declaration of Independence, they actually said, or told the king, you ignore our rights, and therefore we are actually breaking away from you. By insisting and including the rights of individuals, the Founding Fathers made the Magna Carta an important ideal in the American Revolution. Now, when the British settlers came to America in the 1600s, they brought the idea with them. They also brought provisions from the Magna Carta, like majority rule and the right to due process of the law, a speedy trial, and obviously a trial by jury. When the colonists sat down to draft the Constitution, they turned to the Magna Carta and those very important clauses and principles that were written there literally hundreds of years before. By now, you know that the Magna Carta was influential in forming the United States government. We have a United States Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. And we have a Declaration of Independence added to that. All of those documents are very famous in the United States. And those documents were shaped by ideals from the Magna Carta, as well as other ideals such as those ones from the Enlightenment thinkers. Thank you for being part of this presentation. I do hope that you learned a lot from this presentation, and please make sure to subscribe, and I will talk to you soon.